You thought your greatest danger was outside of you, the manipulative colleague, the draining partner, the toxic family system. But Carl Jung warned of something far more insidious, the invisible places inside your own psyche that quietly hollow you out. These are not locations you can flee. They are inner environments you carry everywhere, and they are already shaping your thoughts, your desires, your very sense of self. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that is the terrible secret. What feels like your personality may, in truth, be the imprint of these psychological traps. They don't announce themselves with chaos. They whisper with normalcy. They train you to believe exhaustion is love, emptiness is maturity, and silence is safety. Tonight, we'll descend into those 7 hidden chambers. We'll see why Jung considered them more destructive than any external enemy. And I'll show you how people he guided, broken, hollowed, seemingly lost, became unrecognizable when they escaped. By the end, you'll recognize these places in your own life, and once you name them, you can no longer be possessed by them. Jung's warning did not emerge from abstract speculation. It was born in the clinic, face-to-face with patients who carried the same wound in different guises. One case stands as emblematic, what I call the endless nurse. She was a woman in her early 30s, pale from sleepless nights, who came to Jung convinced that she was failing at love. Her partner was perpetually in crisis, breakdowns, debts, affairs. She described herself as his healer, his lifeline, the only person who truly understood him. Yet every session ended the same way. She would collapse into the chair and whisper, "I don't know why I am always so tired." Jung listened carefully. Over months he noticed the pattern. Every time she gave, he grew stronger, but only enough to demand more. Every act of care fed the cycle. And what unsettled Jung most was her conviction that this depletion was a sign of deep connection. He saw clearly that her vitality was being siphoned, her own unconscious compulsion binding her to the role of rescuer. This wasn't healing, this was extraction. It wasn't devotion, it was devotion weaponized. Jung later wrote that the meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But here he saw something darker. Only one was transformed, and it was never the so-called patient. It was the caregiver who dissolved drop by drop. The endless nurse is not just one woman's story. It is an archetypal trap, a psychological place where countless people dwell without realizing it. And it is the first station in our descent into what Jung called the most dangerous terrains of the psyche. To escape a prison, you must first name its walls. Jung insisted that language is not decoration, it is liberation. Without words, the unconscious remains shapeless. With words, it becomes graspable, something you can confront. So let us define the forces at play when relationships masquerade as healing. The healing relationship, myth. This is the illusion that endless giving will eventually restore balance. It appears noble, but it is simply servitude under a halo. Jung observed that those trapped here mistake exhaustion for love and dependency for intimacy. The rescuer role. Jung warned of the rescuer archetype, one who constructs identity around fixing others. The rescuer feels valuable only when someone else is broken. But because the psyche abhors emptiness, such people unconsciously seek out the perpetually wounded, ensuring the cycle never ends. Trauma bond. In clinical terms, this is the chemical welding of anxiety and longing. Every intermittent reward, a brief tenderness, a small promise, hooks deeper than any cruelty. Jung saw in this the cruel trick of the psyche. What should repel us, instead, binds us tighter. Energy leakage. Jung didn't use our modern phrasing, but he described it precisely. When you give without reciprocity, psychic energy drains into the other and never returns. Over time, you no longer know where you end and the other begins. These terms are not abstractions, they are maps. Without them, you wander in confusion, blaming yourself, believing fatigue is your failure. With them, you begin to see the pattern as it is, systemic, predictable, and, most importantly, escapable. And once you have words, you can name the traps. Now that we have language, we can expose the architecture of deception. Jung taught that the psyche does not merely fall into dysfunction, it repeats patterns with near-mechanical precision until they are made conscious. And nowhere is this more evident than in what I call the 3 healing traps. Trap 1, the clinic. Here, love becomes a hospital. The relationship thrives only when one partner is sick, unstable, or collapsing. Crises arrive like clockwork, and each time the healer steps in, they feel indispensable. But indispensability is not intimacy. It is captivity. Jung observed this dynamic in patients who unconsciously selected partners that guaranteed endless emergencies, because without those emergencies, their own identity as caregiver would dissolve. Trap 2, the project. This is the trap of potential. You do not fall in love with a person as they are, you fall in love with their imagined transformation. Every milestone, sobriety, a new job, one day perhaps loyalty, becomes a marker on the endless construction site. Jung called this the danger of projection, when we fall not for reality, but for our own ideal reflected in another. And yet decades pass while the scaffolding remains unfinished, the structure never complete. Trap 3, the sacrament. Here lies the most seductive danger. Suffering is sanctified. To endure neglect, betrayal, or humiliation is framed as proof of love. Because I stayed, I am holy. Because I endured, I am real. Jung warned that this is how archetypal possession operates. The martyr archetype hijacks the ego, and sacrifice becomes the only language of worth. These traps may look different on the surface, but they all share one core mechanism. They bind you to depletion under the guise of virtue. And like any archetypal pattern, they repeat until you name them. Because, and here is the law Jung discovered, what you refuse to make conscious will rule you as destiny. Now you may ask, why are these traps so magnetic? Why do intelligent, sensitive people walk into them again and again? The answer lies in the mechanism. Jung insisted that repetition is never random. What looks like bad luck is, in truth, a law of the psyche. He called it negative synchronicity, the uncanny way unresolved patterns summon their own reenactments until consciousness breaks the cycle. Let us trace the causal chains. Chain 1, intermittent reward. Because your nervous system evolved to cling to what relieves pain, even briefly, it mistakes inconsistency for intimacy. Therefore, every small kindness after cruelty binds you more tightly than steady love ever could. This is not affection. It is operant conditioning at the level of the soul. Chain 2, identity through rescue. Because the rescuer archetype offers a counterfeit sense of purpose, I matter only if I am needed. You collapse when you are not fixing someone. Therefore, you unconsciously choose those who will remain broken, ensuring the cycle never ends. Jung warned that what is unconscious in you will appear as fate in your relationships. Chain 3, shadow-seeking mirror. Because you have disowned your own unmet needs, anger, boundaries, power, you are magnetized to those who will display them for you in grotesque form. Therefore, you feel both attracted and repelled, caught in the gravity of what Jung called the shadow's projection. When these chains entwine, you are not merely in love, you are possessed. And possession feels inevitable until it is seen. This is why Jung emphasized, liberation does not come by cutting symptoms, but by illuminating the mechanism itself. Once you see the gears turning, the machine cannot hypnotize you. But awareness without consequence is still incomplete. So we must now name the real price, the hidden costs that such healing entanglements extract. Jung often said that the psyche keeps ledgers more precise than any accountant. Every sacrifice, every silence, every swallowed anger is recorded in the unconscious, and with compound interest, the bill eventually comes due. Let us name the hidden costs that such healing entanglements extract. 1. Nervous system ruin. Because you live in perpetual hypervigilance, scanning for the next crisis, your body learns to confuse adrenaline with affection. Therefore, even in peace you feel restless, unable to relax. What should be safety feels like absence. 2. Shrinking social world. Because your energy is monopolized by one person's endless needs, friendships wither, family ties weaken, and solitude becomes isolation. Therefore, when the bond collapses, you find yourself standing in an empty field with no community left to witness you. 3. Creative paralysis. Because every ounce of imagination is spent strategizing around another's instability, there is no fuel left for art, vocation, or vision. Therefore, the very gifts that could have individuated you, what Jung called the treasures of the unconscious, remain buried. 4. Financial and material drain. Because crises always require resources, loans, bailouts, rescues, your material stability erodes. Therefore, you end up tethered not only psychologically but economically, bound by debts of both money and identity. 5. The collapse of self-trust. Because you repeatedly explain away red flags, rewriting reality to preserve the illusion of love, your inner compass corrodes. Therefore, when truth finally emerges, you doubt your own sanity before you doubt the other. Jung warned, the loss of instinct is the greatest danger of civilization. Here, it is the greatest danger of intimacy. These costs are not incidental. They are the very proof that what seemed like healing was in fact depletion. And because the psyche seeks balance, the unconscious will eventually force a reckoning. But you need not wait for collapse. There is a way to measure here and now whether your connection is nourishing or destroying you. Jung would have called it a confrontation with fact, not fantasy. I call it the 10-point energy audit. Jung taught that the unconscious thrives in vagueness. The more blurred the picture, the easier it is for us to say, maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe this is just what love is. To break the spell, you must measure. What is weighed can no longer hide. So here is the 10-point energy audit, a 7-day experiment that forces reality into the open. Each day, assign a +1, 0, or 1 in the following categories. By week's end, your score will reveal whether your bond is renewing you, neutral, or draining you. 1. Sleep quality. Do you wake rested, or does your mind loop their chaos through the night? 2. Morning dread. Do you rise with a quiet steadiness, or with the tension of anticipating conflict? 3. Micro-joy. Did you experience even brief delight, laughter, music, silence, untouched by their shadow? 4. Unsolicited asks. How often did they demand without reciprocity? Note not just the request, but the entitlement beneath it. 5. Money and time outflow. How much did you spend not on shared life, but on stabilizing their instability? 6. Body tension. Where does your body ache after encounters? Jaw, gut, chest. The unconscious keeps its own geography. 7. Broken plans. Count the times you canceled your life to accommodate theirs. 8. Creative minutes. Did you invest even half an hour in your calling, or did all creative oxygen feed their fire? 9. Conflict ruts. Were disagreements circular, always returning to the same wound with no evolution? 10. Boundary violations. Did they step across a line you had drawn, subtle or explicit? Did you excuse it? At week's end, add your score. A positive total means renewal. 0 means stagnation. Negative means leakage. Jung would call that leakage not just unfortunate, but dangerous, for what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. The audit is not merely diagnostic. It is prophetic. It shows you where this path leads if unchecked, into exhaustion, resentment, perhaps even breakdown. But awareness without direction can be cruel. So the question becomes, if you discover you are leaking, what is the way out? For that, we must turn to Jung's insistence on process, the movement from clarity to conversion to choice. Jung believed that liberation is never an accident. It is a process, and processes have phases. If you've completed the energy audit and found yourself in the negative, do not collapse into despair. Collapse is what the trap wants. Instead, follow a deliberate progression. Clarify, convert, choose. Phase 1. Clarify, name the system. Jung observed that what remains unspoken festers in the unconscious, so you must drag the pattern into daylight. Write a one-page relationship ledger. On the left, every act of giving, money, time, forgiveness, silence. On the right, what was returned. In the third column, the behaviors that repeat no matter what you offer. When you see it laid bare, you will understand what Jung meant by the unconscious is a fact, and it behaves like one. Phase 2. Convert, from rescuer to partner. This is the transmutation stage. Here you stop offering promises, which can always be twisted, and begin setting policies. A promise says, I'll always be here. A policy says, I will respond in these specific ways, and no further. Jung saw that patients who shifted from vague devotion to structured reciprocity discovered something shocking. Manipulators fled the moment policy entered the room, for the predator thrives only in the fog. Phase 3. Choose, stay or leave consciously. After 30 days of policies, you assess. Did reciprocity emerge, even imperfectly? Or did sabotage, contempt, and endless excuses rise to the surface? Jung would insist that this is the moment of individuation, when you decide not from guilt or fear, but from consciousness. If you stay knowing the risks. If you leave as a sovereign being, not a fugitive. These phases are not glamorous, they are surgical. But Jung's genius was seeing that true transformation feels less like romance and more like medicine. Bitter at first, but curative in the end. Still, clarity and process are not enough without tools. You need words that protect, scripts that hold the line when your strength falters. And Jung, though he did not draft modern phrases, would have insisted, precision of language is your sword. Jung once wrote that words are not merely sounds, but psychic events. They reshape reality. And nowhere is this more urgent than when you speak to someone who feeds on your silence. Without language, you remain their subject. With language, you redraw the field. Here are 5 scripts, precise, concise, and impossible to twist if you hold them firm. Each one transforms the dynamic because it converts vague obligation into conscious boundary. 1. The boundary script. I'll support you with this for 2 weeks. After that, you'll need another plan. This forces time into the open. Jung observed that infinite availability is the mother's breast repeated. Limitation is the father's law. Without limits, the psyche devours endlessly. 2. The ask-back script. What's your plan without me? Here you return responsibility where it belongs. It is not cruelty, it is individuation. The person must meet their own shadow rather than outsourcing it to you. 3. The delay script. I'll think on this and respond tomorrow at 10 a.m. If it can't wait, use your backup. This shatters the illusion of emergency. Jung noted that chronic crisis is often a mask for manipulation. By delaying, you reveal whether urgency was real or manufactured. 4. The reciprocity script. I'll do A once you've done B. This equalizes the flow. No longer endless giving, but conditional exchange. Jung warned that without reciprocity, eros collapses into parasitism. 5. The exit script. I'm no longer available as a rescuer. If we can't relate as equals, I will step away. This is the nuclear clarity. It is not drama, it is fact. The relationship will either evolve or end. Jung saw this as the ultimate test of reality. Does the bond survive without exploitation, or does it die because exploitation was all it ever was? These scripts do not create war. They create revelation. Either the other adapts, showing there was a person beneath the pattern, or the mask drops, exposing only shadow. But beware, when you deploy these words, reactions will come. And Jung cautioned, the first pushback is not the truth. It is the defense mechanism. What matters is what happens after the smoke clears. So next, we must learn to read the pushback, to recognize whether it signals hope, collapse, or danger. Jung warned that the unconscious never surrenders without resistance. The moment you set boundaries, you will meet not the person, but their defenses. He called this the counterstroke of the shadow, the psyche's attempt to preserve its old order. There are 4 primary pushbacks, each with its own mask. Learn to read them, and you will not be seduced back into servitude. 1. The charm surge. Suddenly they flood you with affection, gifts, promises. It feels intoxicating, almost like the partner you always hoped for. Jung would call this an archetypal inflation, the persona dressed as savior. Your response, consistency. Do not reward the surge. Wait 30 days. If the warmth survives limits, it is real. If it evaporates, it was manipulation. 2. The victim spiral. They collapse into self-pity. You're abandoning me. You never loved me. Jung saw this as regression to the child archetype, weaponizing helplessness. Your response, policy recap. Repeat calmly, I'm here within these boundaries. Beyond them, it's yours to carry. Do not explain further. 3. The rage or contempt. Here the mask cracks. You face open hostility, insults, threats. Jung described this as the shadow's raw eruption when its host feels cornered. Your response, safety first. Step back, go low contact, prepare an exit if the rage escalates. This reaction rarely reforms. 4. The genuine effort, the rarest pushback. They stumble, fail, try again. They take small, observable actions without demanding applause. Jung noted that authentic change is humble, never grandiose. Your response? A probation window. Offer 30 days with 2 checkpoints. If reciprocity grows, cautiously continue. If sabotage returns, you have your answer. The key is this: do not judge by words, judge by patterns. Jung wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." The psyche reveals itself through repetition, and yet, even with clarity, there are traps waiting. Many who set boundaries still fall back, not because they lacked courage, but because they stumbled into familiar pitfalls. We must expose those next. Jung taught that transformation fails not at the moment of courage, but in the quiet relapse that follows. The psyche longs for the familiar, even when the familiar is poison. He warned that the shadow does not disappear, it waits. And it waits most hungrily when you believe you are free. Here are the most common pitfalls that pull people back into extraction. 1. Therapy as delay. The partner announces, "I'm in therapy now," as if attendance itself equals transformation. Jung saw this illusion often, patients using the ritual of analysis to postpone actual change. Your safeguard: demand observable behaviors, not symbolic gestures. 2. Boundary inflation. After a surge of empowerment, you create endless new rules. Don't say this, don't do that, always check in. The chaos of constant amendments undermines your own authority. Jung cautioned that inflated control masks fear. Boundaries must be few, clear, consistent. 3. The secret hope clause. You tell yourself, maybe if I give it 6 more months, even though nothing has shifted. This is the psyche bargaining with its own attachment wound. Jung called it participation mystique, fusion with the other at the expense of self. Recognize this clause for what it is, a contract with illusion, 4. Withdrawal without clarity. Some flee without explanation, hoping disappearance will suffice. But Jung warned that the unspoken returns as fate. Without words, the pattern seeks you again in the next partner, the next friend, the next boss. Only clarity ends possession. Each pitfall is seductive because it feels easier than holding the line. But remember, every relapse deepens the groove in the unconscious, making the next escape harder. To sustain freedom, you must install daily practices that feed your vitality instead of leaking it. These are not optional luxuries. They are your psychological immune system. Jung taught that the psyche is like a vessel. Once drained, it does not refill through wishful thinking, but through deliberate ritual. He warned that neglect of daily renewal allows the shadow to creep back, quietly reclaiming the ground you fought for. To remain sovereign, you must adopt practices that protect and regenerate your inner light. Here are 5 that Jung himself would have recognized as indispensable. 1. The solitude appointment. Reserve at least 20 minutes daily for silent withdrawal. Not scrolling, not consuming, not performing. Pure solitude. Jung often retreated to his tower at Bollingen for exactly this reason. Solitude is where the unconscious surfaces and where borrowed voices fall away. 2. The micro-yes list. Write 3 small acts each day that restore disproportionate calm. A walk, a page of reading, even watering a plant. Jung saw that the soul thrives on symbols, not grand achievements. These micro-yeses tell your psyche, life is still mine. 3. The reciprocity radar. Record 1 moment each day where you received care rather than gave it. Even if small, a kind word, a held door. Why? Because the rescuer archetype forgets to notice reciprocity when it appears. Training awareness recalibrates what you expect from others. 4. The financial repair. Create a me fund equal to the last month's rescues, the money you spent patching others' chaos. Redirect it toward your own growth, classes, tools, even rest. Jung warned that energy is finite. Money is simply energy in material form. Reclaim both. 5. The community swap. Consciously replace circles of extraction with circles of reciprocity. Seek communities where giving is matched, where truth is spoken without exploitation. Jung wrote, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. Both are transformed. Choose circles that transform you upward, not downward." These practices are not accessories. They are maintenance of the self that emerged from fire. Without them, you risk slipping back into old archetypal grooves, mistaking exhaustion for love once again. But to understand their power fully, we must zoom out beyond the daily and look at history, at those who failed to integrate these practices, and those who became sovereign because of them. Jung believed that history itself is a mirror of the psyche. In the lives of others, we see our own destiny foreshadowed. He often compared patients' struggles to mythic figures, warning that those who ignore archetypes end up living them blindly. So let us hold 2 figures side by side. The cautionary rescuer. Think of the countless men and women, saints, martyrs, even revolutionaries, who poured out their vitality until there was nothing left. Their diaries read like confessions of exhaustion, always giving, never replenishing. They became indispensable to everyone, yet invisible to themselves. Jung would call this the inflated healer archetype, sacrifice mistaken for wholeness. Their legacy is a warning. Devotion without individuation ends in annihilation. The exemplary sovereign. Now contrast this with those who loved fiercely, yet refused to be consumed. Figures who withdrew when their giving was met with contempt, who reappeared with clarity, boundaries, and a radiant presence that no one could extinguish. Jung admired such individuals because they embodied individuation, the union of compassion and selfhood. They became living proof that you can serve without dissolving, connect without losing, give without draining. The difference between the two was not capacity, but consciousness. One mistook depletion for destiny. The other recognized that wholeness is the true gift to the world. And that is your choice now. Will you replay the cautionary script or step into sovereignty? To make that step, you must formalize a new identity, a declaration that rescuer is no longer your name. Jung taught that identity is not fixed. It is a mask, a persona, and beneath it lives the possibility of rebirth. But he warned that if you cling to a mask long enough, it fuses with your skin. The rescuer mask becomes who I am. To escape, you must strip it away and reclaim something deeper. The shift is this, from healer as self to self as whole. The rescuer says, I exist only when others need me. The whole self says, I exist, therefore I choose where my energy flows. The rescuer offers devotion as currency. The whole self offers presence as gift. The rescuer dissolves into the wound of others. The whole self stands rooted, capable of care without collapse. Jung called this individuation, the lifelong process of becoming what you truly are, not what others scripted you to be. And individuation demands ritual, not just insight. Here is one. Write your relationship constitution. 3 sections, no more. Non-negotiables, the boundaries you will never sacrifice again. Respect, reciprocity, truth. Repair rules, what reconciliation must look like. Accountability, change over apology. Exit conditions, the lines that, once crossed, signal departure without guilt. This constitution is not for them, it is for you. A mirror to recall yourself when manipulation whispers otherwise. With this document, you are no longer a rescuer searching for fragments to heal. You are a sovereign self, whole, who can choose to give from abundance rather than compulsion. And with identity stabilized, you are ready for a test, a brief 7-day reset that transforms theory into lived strength. Jung knew that transformation must be embodied, not just imagined. You are what you do, not what you say you'll do, he reminded us. So here is a structured 7-day reset plan, a living experiment that shifts you from depletion to sovereignty. Day 1, the ledger. Begin the relationship. Ledger, list what you gave, what returned, and what always repeats. This is the mirror that ends denial. Day 2, policy design. From the ledger, craft 3 clear policies. Example, I do not respond to crises after 9 p.m., or financial support is contingent on repayment plans. Policies transform fog into form. Day 3, script rehearsal. Take the 5 boundary scripts we named earlier. Practice aloud, ideally with a trusted ally. Jung knew that words rehearse psyche. Speaking them once makes them easier when pressure comes. Day 4, the policy conversation. Speak your new terms, not with drama, but with calm precision. Observe the reaction without judgment. You are not seeking agreement, you are measuring reality. Day 5, the environment sweep. Clear your space of extraction anchors, unpaid bills you covered, gifts that carry guilt, photos that trap you in sentimentality. Jung often said, symbols are the language of the soul. Remove symbols of bondage, install symbols of sovereignty. Day 6, reciprocity checkpoint. Notice what has returned since day 4, a gesture of balance, or only pressure, rage, or silence. Record, don't rationalize. The audit continues. Day 7, the decision retreat. Take 2 hours in solitude. Review the week's evidence. Ask, is reciprocity possible here, or is this extraction in disguise? Whatever emerges, honor it. Choice is the seed of individuation. This week is not a full cure, but it is a crucible. In 7 days you will know whether your connection breathes life or bleeds it, and that clarity is priceless. But clarity alone is not enough. We must integrate everything we have learned into a single, enduring vision, so you can walk forward without doubt. Jung warned that the psyche punishes avoidance, but rewards integration. You have now seen the traps, the costs, the mechanisms, the exits. The only danger left is forgetting. So let us integrate. If a relationship demands that you be the clinic, the project, or the sacrament, it is not love. It is extraction. Because love replenishes, but extraction devours. Because love respects boundaries, but extraction thrives only where lines blur. Because love invites wholeness, but extraction requires your diminishment. You have learned to measure your energy, to speak with surgical clarity, to read pushbacks without being seduced. You have named the pitfalls, installed daily practices, and drafted a constitution for your sovereignty. This is individuation in action, the movement from unconscious repetition to conscious choice. The danger was never that you loved too deeply. The danger was that you mistook depletion for devotion. Now you know the difference. So I leave you with this commission. Run the 7-day reset. Share your energy audit score in the comments. Declare which script you will use this week, and tell me, which of the 3 traps has ruled you the longest? By naming it, you already weaken it. Remember Jung's final truth. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not a rescuer, not a martyr. A whole self, radiant, selective, sovereign. The danger isn't that you give too much. The danger is failing to build a conscious relationship with that gift. Use it now as cultural medicine. Become part of what's next.